If you love ghost stories, mysteries, and spooky tales, you definitely should not miss this. The chilling experience I'll be sharing with you today is a story about an office building. For those of you listening right now, do any of you work in an office building? Imagine a towering structure with nearly 30 floors. During the day, it bustles with people coming in and out, working in their respective offices. But after sunset, the atmosphere transforms entirely. What was once lively becomes eerily quiet and unnervingly still. It's hard to put into words, but the shift is palpable. The story I'm about to share took place in one such office building in Bangkok, and it happened to a woman who worked there. She encountered something strange late at night, something that left her deeply unsettled. Sounds intriguing, right? But before we dive into the story, may I ask for your support? Please give this video a like and subscribe to my channel to show your encouragement. Are you ready? Let's get into the story. This story revolves around Jane, who experienced this incident firsthand 3 years ago. Jane, at the time, was a 28-year-old woman who had recently moved to Bangkok for work. Originally from Nakhon Sawan, she had been working in her hometown after graduating. However, as time went on, she felt the urge to advance her career, prompting her to start applying for jobs in the capital. Once she moved to Bangkok, Jane landed a position as an accountant at a mid-sized technology company. This company was located in one of the many office buildings in Bangkok. The building was a typical high-rise, home to numerous businesses occupying various floors. Jane's company rented space on the 15th floor. The building itself had a sleek, modern design, with large glass windows that offered a stunning view of the city. The office building looked modern and inviting during the day, making it a desirable workplace. Being from a provincial town, Jane was diligent and highly dedicated to her work after getting the chance to start her career in Bangkok. She often worked late into the night, determined to complete everything flawlessly, hoping to prove herself to her boss. Jane believed her hard work would lead to promotions and a more stable, prosperous future. For the first 2 months, everything went smoothly. Jane adapted well to her colleagues and the work environment. However, one day, something strange happened to her. She recalled the incident vividly. It was a Friday night, during the month-end financial close. Jane needed to finalize all her reports to present to the management on Monday morning. There was a mountain of work to complete, so she stayed at her desk, working tirelessly from morning until late at night. By the time she wrapped up most of her tasks, it was almost 8 p.m. Despite her efforts, there were still a few crucial details left unfinished. Jane decided to take the remaining work home to finish over the weekend. In her rush, she packed her belongings and shut down her computer quickly, eager to leave. She hurried out of the office, headed to the BTS station, and eventually made her way home. Once she arrived home, Jane went about her usual evening routine before sitting down at her desk to continue her work. However, she soon realized she had forgotten a critical document needed to complete her report. The folder containing the important files was still on her office desk. Looking at the clock, it was already past 9 p.m. Jane didn't want to return to the office, especially since it was a weekend. But her strong sense of responsibility left her no choice. She decided to drive back to the office to retrieve the documents. Jane arrived at the office building around 10 p.m. She parked her car in the basement parking lot, noting that hers was the only car there. The silence in the parking lot was unsettling, and the eerie stillness of the surroundings gave her an uneasy feeling. After Jane stepped out of her car, her footsteps echoed loudly in the silent basement. Despite the unsettling atmosphere, she didn't think much of it at the time. Jane hurried toward the elevator, pressing the button for the 15th floor to head straight to her office. The elevator began its slow ascent as Jane berated herself internally for forgetting such an important document, forcing her to drive back late at night. While lost in her thoughts, the elevator suddenly stopped on the 7th floor. The doors slowly slid open, revealing a strange sight, a completely empty, dark space without a single piece of furniture. The only illumination came from the light within the elevator, casting faint beams onto the desolate floor. Confused, Jane glanced at the floor indicator, which confirmed she was indeed on the 7th floor. A memory from her early days at the company surfaced. Some co-workers had shared eerie tales about this building, mentioning that, despite its nearly 30 floors, there was one floor no company had ever rented. The reason for this remained unknown, but it was common knowledge that the floor had been left abandoned for years. Jane stood frozen in the elevator, perplexed. Why had the elevator stopped on this floor? She scanned her surroundings, but saw nothing beyond the dimly lit, empty expanse. Feeling uneasy, she quickly pressed the door close button, eager to continue her journey to the 15th floor. But the elevator didn't budge. Frustrated and slightly panicked, Jane repeatedly pressed the button, yet the doors remained stubbornly open. As she anxiously tried to make the elevator move, something in her peripheral vision caught her attention, and it sent chills down her spine. At the far end of the corridor, perfectly aligned with the elevator doors, stood a woman. She was facing away from Jane, her long hair cascading down to her mid-back, wearing what appeared to be standard office attire. The woman stood completely still, unmoving. A wave of dread washed over Jane. She was certain she had scanned the area moments ago and seen no one. Where had this woman come from? Trying to rationalize the situation, Jane told herself it could be a building employee working late. But deep down, she knew something was off. As Jane frantically pressed the button to close the elevator doors, the woman began to move. Slowly, she turned her head to face Jane, and the sight was enough to make her blood run cold. The woman's face was unnaturally pale, completely devoid of color. Her lips were so white they seemed to blend into her skin, and her eyes, dark, empty voids, stared directly at Jane. Time seemed to stand still. Jane, paralyzed by fear, could only watch as the woman took slow, deliberate steps toward the elevator. The closer she got, the more Jane's terror intensified. Unable to contain her fear any longer, Jane shouted in a trembling voice, "Don't come any closer. Stay away." But it didn't work. The woman continued to approach, each step quickening until she broke into a full sprint toward the elevator. Jane, now in a state of panic, pressed the elevator close button frantically, her trembling hands slipping over the controls. She prayed desperately for the doors to shut before the woman could reach her. Finally, the doors began to slide shut, just as the woman was only steps away. The elevator door closed just in time, sealing Jane inside. She stood frozen, her heart pounding in her chest, sweat streaming down her face. Although the immediate danger was gone, the fear lingered heavily in the air. When the elevator reached the 15th floor, the familiar office surroundings brought her a brief sense of relief. Jane bolted to her desk, grabbed the forgotten documents, and hurried back toward the elevator, determined to leave the building as quickly as possible. On her way back, however, something felt off. Passing by a large glass window that reflected her movements, Jane caught sight of something that made her blood run cold. In the reflection, she saw the same woman, dressed in white, walking behind her. Jane forced herself to remain calm, suppressing the rising terror as she quickened her pace. She stepped into the elevator and hit the button for the basement parking level, silently praying for the ride to be uneventful. As the elevator descended, Jane described those moments as the longest of her life. Fear gripped her so tightly that she could barely breathe. When the elevator finally arrived at the basement, the doors opened, and she wasted no time sprinting to her car. Without looking back, she started the engine and drove out of the building as fast as she could. The aftermath. Even though she made it home safely that night, Jane was haunted by the encounter. She couldn't bring herself to stay late at the office again. The experience left a deep scar in her memory. Unable to shake the fear, Jane eventually shared her story with an elderly cleaning lady at the building, a woman named Auntie C, who had worked there for many years. When Auntie C heard Jane's story, she visibly shuddered. She revealed that Jane was not the first person to encounter the spirit of the woman on the 7th floor. According to Auntie C, about 10 years ago, the 7th floor had been home to a small company. The woman Jane encountered was the manager of that company. She had been known for her strict and intense nature, which had caused many of her employees to quit. Tragically, one night, the manager died suddenly of heart failure in her office. After her death, strange occurrences began to plague the floor, leading to its eventual abandonment. No company had rented the 7th floor since. Jane was left shaken by Auntie C's story, realizing the spirit she had encountered was likely the restless soul of that manager, still lingering in the building where she had spent her final moments. This story remains a mystery. The spirit's appearance raises questions about what it wanted to communicate. For Jane, however, that night left a deep mark on her memory, and she has never returned to the office at night since. And that's the story I wanted to share with you today. I'd like to thank Jane for sharing her experience with me via email. So, what do you think of this story? Personally, I believe that tales about haunted offices are a classic topic. As I mentioned, tall office buildings in Bangkok with multiple floors often have a stark contrast between the atmosphere during the day and at night. Additionally, there are often mysterious events tied to such places, events that outsiders may never know about. Some locations might have seen tragic deaths or unfortunate incidents, leaving behind strange occurrences. New employees might never be aware of these hidden stories, while longtime staff may know them all too well. How about you? Do you work in an office with a creepy or haunted vibe like in this story? Or have you experienced anything strange at your workplace? Feel free to share your story in the comments. If anyone out there has their own chilling experience they'd like me to share, feel free to send it to the email address provided below. And before we wrap up, I'd like to kindly ask you to give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to hit the notification bell to support this little channel. Thank you for staying with me until the end of this story. See you in the next video. Goodbye.